Assalamu alaikum, and welcome back once again to Today in African History with Baba Shaka. I'm Baba Shaka, and today is July 5th, 2021. Yes, as most of you are aware, yesterday, these here yet to be United States staged its 4th of July celebration, and a good time was had by some. Today, we'll look at Africans in Canada and their contributions to World War One. Now, when the First World War began in 1914, African men in Canada responded to the call to arms. Like other loyal citizens who flocked to recruiting centers, they wanted to do their part for king and country. Not sure who's king, but they want to do their part for king and country. Now, despite being ready and willing to serve overseas, and contrary to official government policy, many potential recruits learned from most unit commanding officers that, quote, this is a white man's war, unquote, and black men were not wanted by the Canadian military. As a result, the vast majority of African men were turned away, ostensibly to avoid a quote-unquote checkerboard army. Despite this rejection, about 1,500 African men did manage to enroll in the Canadian forces across the country. But Africans in Canada were determined to serve in greater numbers. Community leaders wrote letters of protest and approached local and federal politicians to make their voices heard. Finally, with the help of supportive white Canadians, in 1916, the Canadian military responded by establishing a segregated construction battalion. The African population of Canada at the time was roughly about 20,000, with the majority, somewhere around 7,000, in Nova Scotia. On July 5th, this date, but back in 1916, over 600 African men came together at Pictou, Nova Scotia. Now, because of its large African population, Nova Scotia became the base of the unit. Pictou was also the closest town to the residence of Lieutenant Colonel Donald Sutherland. Not the actor Donald Sutherland, but this is another Donald Sutherland, who was a prominent railroad contractor who had volunteered to form the battalion, provided he could do it close to home, sort of like a hobby, see? Now, comprised of about 300 men from Nova Scotia and another 125 from New Brunswick, Ontario, and the Canadian prairies, and then another 163 from the United States. These are guys who couldn't fight over the United States. They went north because they were determined that they're going to fight. And approximately 30 from the British West Indies. Number 2 Construction Battalion, CEF, was established. The men who comprised about 7% of the total African population of Canada became the first and only African unit created in Canada after the Confederation in 1867. Now, the battalion's mission was to support combat troops on the Western Front in Europe and was one of 3 construction battalions that Canada established during the war. But although made up of African enlisted men, the unit's officers were white, with one notable exception. The battalion's chaplain, the Reverend Dr. William A. White, was given the rank of honorary captain, making him the only African officer in the battalion and the Canadian military during the First World War, and one of only a handful in the entire British Empire. The Black Battalion, as the unit was usually called, sailed to England in March of 1917 before moving to the Jura Mountains in southeastern France in May. Here, the men assisted 4 companies of the Canadian Forestry Corps in logging, milling, and shipping lumber, which was a critical commodity during the war. They also dug trenches, built railroads, repaired roads, and laid barbed wire for combat operations. Anything except hold a gun. All right? Now, despite their crucial service, these men were frequently subjected to the same prejudice as at home. When the war ended, the battalion returned to Canada in January of 1919 and eventually disbanded in September 1920. Now, the legacy of the number 2 Construction Battalion may have been lost forever had it not been for the efforts of Canadian Senator Calvin Ruck, who in 1983 organized the first reunion and recognition event to honor the surviving members of the unit. Following this, in 1986, was the publication of his book entitled The Black Battalion, 1916 to 1920, Canada's Best Kept Military Secret. As a matter of fact, I just ordered it off of Amazon. You could probably find it there or elsewhere. Okay. Now, since 1993, there have been annual celebrations in Pictou to honor the men of No. 2 Construction Battalion. Under the direction of the Black Cultural Society of Nova Scotia and in partnership with the Canadian Armed Forces and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, descendants of the soldiers who serve and others gather to commemorate the men of this unique unit and their enduring place in Canadian military history. Now, this is another example of why we have to tell our own stories, because, unfortunately, no one else will. So, well, I want to say a very happy birthday to my friend and brother, Toussaint McCrae. I hope and pray that this birthday is the absolute best you've ever had, but not as good as next year's, inshallah. Please allow me to express our continued appreciation for all of our subscribers who continue to support our efforts. For those of you who have not yet subscribed, please hit that subscribe button just below the screen there and lend us your much needed support in delivering these daily lessons. Please hit like and leave a comment down in the comment section below. But most importantly, please share, especially with the young amongst us, because as you and I both know, this material is not taught in our school. No, it's not. So, until tomorrow, inshallah, this is Baba Shaka with Today in African History. Masalam.